Welcome to Head of the Class, a podcast produced by Our Schools USA. I'm Christina Gagne, the former school board member.
And I'm Kristi Hirsch, the former educator and current parent of 3 kids in public schools.
Well, we are so excited to be kicking off another one of our video podcasts. And across the country, parents who want to protect public schools have taken to social media to organize and dispel misinformation. And they're fighting for public schools on multiple fronts, from pushing back on extreme ideas that lead to harmful policies to stopping policies like voucher programs that defund public education.
And today we are really excited to have Brittney Mast joining us. So she's a lifelong Oregon resident who lives in the Portland suburbs with her 2 kids and a dog. She worked in higher ed for a lot of years before deciding to be a stay-at-home mom. I can identify with that myself. And right when her daughter was born. So she also, one of you might recognize her from the Instagram account, Moms for Oregon. We love her. Her memes are my favorite by far. But also, she originally made that account as a way to get the word out about extremist school board members and what things were happening. But the account has evolved into like a political guide for Oregon millennial moms. So Brittney, we're so happy to have you. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me, Christina and Kristi. So good to see you guys.
So, I know you have a lot going on there, but right now you have sort of I'm just going to dive right in here to what's
go for it.
System. You have vouchers being introduced at the state level. Is that correct?
That is right. So it hasn't been introduced as legislation. Instead, the people who are trying to bring vouchers to Oregon are doing it through the ballot measure system. Mm-hmm. So they are currently collecting signatures from voters, hoping to get it on this November's ballot in Oregon. So
yeah, we actually have the same thing happening in California with not vouchers at this moment, but other ballot initiatives that, they want to make some changes in our schools are currently doing the same thing here. So they have like a certain amount of time to gather signatures, and then it would go on the ballot if they make it by a deadline. Is that accurate?
That is correct. Yeah, we're in the same boat.
So how did you get here? How did it come up? Where did this come from?
So it's interesting. I feel like a lot of these school choice issues stemmed from COVID and what we all went through during the pandemic. And so Oregon is no different. I think a lot of parents had some epiphanies during that time that maybe, they wanted to seek alternative forms of education, which is totally fine. But that has leaked into defunding public education. And that is how, that is the role that vouchers are now playing. It's a way to take public money away from public schools. And so that is what we're dealing with. But yeah, I think it does stem from COVID, kind of the upheaval in, K through 12 education at that time. And I think it's just kind of ballooned from there, unfortunately. So.
And what's your pulse on, how voters are thinking about this? Has there been any polling or just in your conversations with parents?
No, actually, hardly anyone is talking about it in Oregon, which is why I have spent so much time talking about it on my account. It has not gotten a lot of attention in general. Our local news stations aren't really covering it yet. Our big papers have touched on it like here and there, but nothing big and not for months now. And so, yeah, it's not really on the forefront of people's minds. And because my account is directly, we really try to reach moms specifically. And so because that is who my account is reaching out to, it's something that I try to talk about a lot because this is something that directly affects our lives. Our children are in school, it's our kids' education, the schools that they go to, the funding that those schools have. So yeah, I have been talking about it a lot because I feel like nobody is getting it anywhere else. So.
And do you feel like there are people pushing it though? I mean, do you have your pulse on sort of the force that's driving it? Do you see them collecting signatures or like, sort of this big push to gather signatures? Do you feel like they have any traction?
Yeah. So just because mainstream media, quote unquote, mainstream media isn't talking about it,
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they're not hard at work, right? I mean, they have a very large social media presence. They have their people in Facebook groups chatting about how horrible public schools are and how they need to get on board to school choice. And so, yeah, they're definitely more at the grassroots level trying to get the signatures that they need in order to take it to the statewide vote. I actually drive to my son's preschool every day. And on the way at one of the major intersections that I drive through, there's a huge sign now on the fence that says, vote for school choice. And it's specifically these two measures that the sign is advocating for. And so they're definitely getting their word out however they can, even if it's not through our mainstream media sources. So, yeah.
And what are they proposing? What is the plan that they have on the ballot initiative?
Great question, because there are actually two ballot initiatives that they are promoting right now. They had to break them into two pieces here in Oregon because our ballot initiatives have to be specifically about one issue only. So you can't lump multiple issues together in one ballot measure. You have to just do one at a time. So there are two ballot measures that they are trying to advance. One is the open enrollment amendment. So this is an amendment that would actually open up public schools to transfer between districts. So as opposed to students being limited to school district boundaries, it would open up enrollment to any public school anyone wanted to go to, as long as there was room at the school. Of course, this is a tricky way of defunding schools because funding follows the students. A quote unquote better school then that's taking money away from one school and giving it to another. So open enrollment is one thing that they're pushing, I think, as a way for them to say it's not just about private school, we're also trying to help public schools. And then the second ballot measure is the school choice amendment. So this is specifically the voucher system. They would introduce a voucher system to Oregon. It would have zero financial limitations. So it doesn't matter how much money a family makes, they would qualify for it. And it would allow families to open up a education savings fund for students where the state would deposit $7,600 per student into the account, and then families would be able to use it for private school, homeschool, educational related expenses. And that's how the voucher system that they propose would work. So.
And I just want to note for those that are watching and listening that, when they don't have any income requirements, so when everybody gets the $7,600, effectively families that are also already using private schools are basically getting money to go to those same private schools. So sometimes these voucher measures are a little tricky in the sense that it's not 100% clear that that's money that is going to go out the door that wasn't going out the door before. That's public taxpayer money that's now subsidizing private school education. So
exactly,
clarify that.
Yeah, and it is interesting because, there are 10 other programs like this across the country. I think Arizona is probably the one that we hear about the most right now because it has kind of sent them into a crisis mode. But when private schools start receiving voucher money from their customers, from families who are paying to go to those schools, it has not led to equality in the sense of more people have the opportunity to go to these schools. Instead, these private schools have raised tuition because now their customers are getting coupons and they can they have more disposable income to then raise tuition to give back to the school. And so they're double dipping not only in public funds now, but increasing prices that families have to then cover themselves. And so, yeah, it's not an equalizer in any way.
Yeah, and these other states that have voucher programs, you brought up Arizona, and there's a ton of coverage on Arizona, and for really good reason. The voucher program there is costing hardworking families $900 million. And similar programs in Florida and other states, they're not fiscally managed well. And in fact, they're becoming budget killers.
Yes.
And they're causing a lot of issues when it comes to the yearly budget time because these programs are not made with an intent to actually equalize. They're not made with an intent to provide choice. They're made with an intent to undermine and underfund public education. And so they're not thinking with their like fiscal responsibility hat on. And
Yeah.
so it's also just dangerous because state budgets are finite in a lot of ways. And if all these resources are going to voucher programs, other programs not even related to public education will also end up getting cut.
Yeah. Yeah, and introducing vouchers to the system has proven um to only or to not increase diversity at private schools. The statistic in Arizona is pretty staggering. Something like 90% of families who are paying for private school are the ones who are still who are the ones who kept using vouchers after the program was introduced. Like there was only a 10% increase of people who decided, oh yeah, we should do this too. So for all the rest of those people, this was just money that they never had before, and all of a sudden was going towards their private education. And so, yeah, it's not pulling in new people like they want you to believe it would. Yeah.
I think another thing I want to make sure we note here, just in case someone hasn't heard our podcast before, is that, when money goes to private schools, those private schools are unchecked. They are allowed to discriminate. They do not have to take kids that are, for example, on IEPs. They do not have to take second language learners. They do not have to take, they can discriminate against LGBTQIA families and kids. And they have no accountability measures in place. And that is usually allowed to continue underneath these policies, these ESA policies that we see introduced across the country.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something important too, is that it's not school choice. It is the schools choose the kids.
It's school choice in that sense, yeah.
It is school choice, but it's not a parent choice. How about that? This is not parent rights.
No.
This is school rights, right? Like
Right.
the school picks the kids when you do this, and it's not public school. So
Yeah.
our tax dollars fund places that are allowed to discriminate. And I
Yeah.
think that, that's something that for me is like a red flag about one of the many red flags about these
Yeah.
programs.
Yeah, one of the interesting angles that so the organization that is spearheading this movement in Oregon is called Education Freedom for Oregon. And one of the things that I've heard them talk about repeatedly is that this is going to give parents the constitutionally protected right to choose the best form of schooling for their kids. And I hear that and I think to myself, but parents in Oregon can already do that. Like they can already choose private school if they want. They can already homeschool if they want. Like nothing is stopping parents from doing what's best for their kids. And if that is what you want to do, then that's great. Like I have no problem with people choosing private school or homeschool or whatever is going to work best for them. Like that's not the issue. The issue is when you're taking public money and putting it into private institutions that are unchecked and have zero balances or management behind it. Yeah.
I think too, another interesting thing, and I'll pivot a little here to, sort of piggyback on this idea, is that, you are in a very typical blue state. I think people like us in California, they see us and they think like, oh, nothing's happening there. They're fine. Right.
Yeah.
Like they're not going to have anything pass there. And, that's not the case really. Like we're seeing a lot of very discriminatory policies being passed across California.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that's what you see in Oregon too, but here in California, we see that because they can't take the state level office, they really heavily focus on these local elections. And then they use our local school boards as legislative branches almost. They do legislating from our school board because they can't win at the state level. Tell us, like, what are your thoughts on that? And what are you seeing, in Oregon?
Yeah, it is true. I mean, Oregon is a blue state, reliably blue. And because of that, people don't usually think of us when they think of extremist policies or right-wing legislation moving through. And it's true, like just like California, we are relatively protected from it. But at the local level, a lot of stuff is happening that people aren't necessarily paying attention to. The director of Education Freedom for Oregon is actually a former Republican gubernatorial candidate. His name is Mark Thielman, and he was a Republican candidate for governor in 2022. And he lost that primary. He didn't end up being the final candidate, but he was a school superintendent of a small school district, kind of in the middle of Oregon during COVID. And he became kind of notorious because he was flouting COVID restrictions and not requiring masks and things like that. And so he kind of made a name for himself by being controversial during a really scary time. And then he did this governor's race and lost that primary. And now he's moved on to this. And so you can kind of see like the tactics, like they gain notoriety over something and then they just use it to build, the next step on the next step and their brand and just try to take it as far as it'll go. So that's been really interesting to watch. Like he's spearheading these ballot initiatives, which isn't surprising. But yeah, I mean, we also have there's a specific school board in Eastern Oregon that I'm watching that was taken over by Moms for Liberty-esque candidates last May. These three women ran on a slate as mama bears, and out of a 5-seat school board, the three of them won. And so now they have the majority on their school board. And the drama has just been endless. And I feel so bad for that community. And so, and actually, you guys are connected with them because it's Crook County, and I know that they have an affiliation with your network. And so, yeah, it's just these things exist here, even though we are also lucky to be protected in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and there's very similar patterns across the country. In California, there are school board members and former school board members who are behind these anti-transgender ballot initiatives. They're trying to qualify for a November ballot, but they start out like causing chaos in some way or another. They end up in office, and then they really want to just become part of that like far right machinery, like get notoriety. And so very similar pattern in what you're describing. And then we see that across the country. We're seeing the very similar things with school board members. That's their first step. And then they want to run for the state house. And then they want to like run for, superintendent of public instruction. So I think it's important to note that this is happening because this is the way they get into office, because in states like Oregon and California, they might not be successful just trying to run for a position like that out of the gate. And we did follow the mama bears. That was on our radar
Yep.
last election cycle when that happened. And you're absolutely right. I mean, we have been, checking in with communities whose boards flipped in 2020 and in 2022. And in all of these communities, these members get on these boards and they're not effective board members. They're effective in passing bad policies that harm families, but they're not effective in doing the job. And they also bring with them a lot of chaos and a lot of uncertainty for the people that work at the school districts, the people that attend the schools. And so, I want to underscore that is that it really does impact not just the district, but the broader community when these people come in and take over a board.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's hard to watch. I mean, you don't want a community to go through that. So yeah.
It is very scary as somebody living through it.
Yeah.
Personally, yeah, I've never been so worried about my kids, future in my school district that I've loved for so long. Yeah, it's very frustrating and concerning for sure.
Yeah.
And you're leveraging social media in such a dynamic way. You're very creative and the use of your account. And, what we're learning is, all over the political and ideological spectrum, people are going less to traditional mainstream media and they are going to, Instagram or TikTok and finding people that they trust and people's information who they like how it's packaged, or they like the people just as the messengers themselves. It'd be great to hear a little bit about, what drew you to starting the Instagram account and sort of your experience managing that and connecting with people.
Well, the whole reason I started it was actually because of Oregon school board elections last May. So I was driving around town in the spring and I would see all these school board signs, rather vote for school board member signs all around town. And I would go home and look up these people and I would be like, oh my gosh, like this is a pretty crazy person. Like why, like how does nobody know about this? And it's because people are too busy. Like, right. They don't have the time to look up these people. They don't have the time to dig in deep or figure out the dynamics of what a person is actually campaigning on or actually wants to do. And so I was like, I could tell, like, my 300 friends on Instagram about these crazy people. But I feel like I could do a little bit more. And so I created this public account, Moms for Oregon, which is how that started. And basically, it was just a way for me to recommend school board candidates during the school board season last year, and just try to help people figure out who to vote for so that they didn't have to do it themselves, and try to get the word out about bad candidates, because they were all over the place last year. And then school board elections happened in May, and that was amazing to see the account build up during that time and see the enthusiasm. And so after that, I was like, all right, well, where do we go from here? And it's turned into what it has now, which is advocating for basically all kinds of issues that impact moms and or parents in general. We campaign to pass stricter gun laws. We want robust public school funding. We want reproductive health care. And all these issues are just as important in Oregon as they are in red states, where they might get a little bit more attention. But so that's what we're doing at Moms for Oregon. So.
And I love one of the things you shared on your account, and I think this is really important to talk about, is that, this idea that, like, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to, like, learn and get new information and take it in and change your mind. I think a lot of people get sort of stuck in, identity politics and being so tied to these beliefs that they think they have, and are, kind of getting, their pride gets in the way. And instead of taking the information in and thinking like, maybe I was wrong about this, they sort of dig in further to that opinion. And, I know, like, I think it was a few weeks ago, you had shared how you have greatly shifted, and this whole idea of, like, it's okay to take in this new information and change your mind. And I think that's important. Can you tell me, like, how that was received? Maybe talk to some listeners who might be listening, and somebody who might be changing their mind about public schools and public education. And
that was something that I've been thinking about for a while, because my views have shifted a lot over the last, 20-ish years. I'm not the same person that I was in high school, and I think that that's a good thing. I think we should all be okay with growing and evolving, and when we learn new information, maybe letting that affect our views. And so I was thinking about this a lot, because I am definitely a person whose viewpoints have shifted, and I just want people to know that that's okay, right? That, like, you're not weak for changing your mind. That there's nothing wrong with your viewpoint shifting based on new information or new experiences. I truly feel like this is one of the reasons that the right is going after public education so hard, is because my college experience was transformative in this way. Like, and it's not because I went to, like, a liberal school that was indoctrinating me. It wasn't like the school that was the issue. It was just me being there outside of my safe suburban bubble for the first time ever and having new experiences. Like, it wasn't the school that was doing it. It was just being in a new place with new people at that time in my life, which kind of opened me up and helped me realize that, okay, maybe things aren't as black and white as I thought they were. And so I really feel like that's a big reason why the right attacks education so much, is because they don't want people to step outside their bubbles and change their minds. But we have to normalize that, because there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing weak about it. And it's a normal part of living. And if we can't change our mind, then, we're just going to be stuck in the same place forever. So.
Yeah, I was indoctrination, that word. We seem to, like, see it and hear it, like, every day in our space. And I was just walking my dogs this morning, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I just really do find it so ironic that they, accuse people that went to college of being indoctrinated, and then they're going into our public schools and, like, PragerU should be the curriculum, 1776. I just, like, okay, we're the indoctrinated.
I know, it's crazy.
Children,
Yeah.
but it's just wild how they've been able to take these buzzwords and phrases, parents' rights, indoctrination, there's a
Mhm.
whole other list of them that of a lexicon of language they
Yeah.
use, and we've had to react to it.
Right.
And that's something we're constantly trying to figure out is, I don't always want us to be on the defense. Like,
Absolutely.
how can we reframe? And I think that's one
Yeah.
of our goals this year at our schools is we have to reframe some of this. But
Absolutely.
I do find it funny, just like whenever I hear indoctrination, like, it's not us.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that, Christina, because my daughter is in first grade and she came home from school last week with this whole book about America and like all these different American symbols that they were learning about and like what they represent. And like it was the American flag and the Statue of Liberty and the Liberty Bell and the bald eagle and like all these like really like basic but new to her
Yeah.
American symbols. And it was all about like patriotism, right? And like learning to love your country and like the great things that we stand for. And I loved it. And at the same time, I was thinking like, they're still teaching our kids to like love where they live. There's like they're still like they're still proud to be Americans. And like I don't understand why they think that like that's something that is cut out of schools now. Like that's still a part of kids curriculum. So
I
yeah.
think they're like, they accuse others of doing it. And so they get all these people on board because they think it's happening in other places, right?
Right.
Like, if you think
Hmm.
about your school, and I think this is something important to like reiterate, is that people love their school and their teachers, and they know
Absolutely.
those things aren't happening in their school, but then they start thinking it must be happening other places because
Yeah.
XYZ is telling me so. And that's
Hmm.
just not true.
Yeah.
There might be one outlier that's super rare, and then they
Yeah.
take that and go with it, but it's
Hmm.
just not true on a whole scale. It's just not
Exactly.
widespread.
Exactly. No.
Like that's to me is what people need to hang on to. Like, your public schools, your
Yeah.
teachers, you love them.
Exactly. Exactly. So
Yeah.
important to remember. Exact. I mean, so much of their rhetoric is fear based, right? They want people to be scared and they want people to be afraid. And yeah, you need to remind people to stop and take a breath because what is actually happening at the school down the street from you? Is it anything like what you're hearing about? Probably not.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And public schools are not black boxes. I mean, you can go to
Right.
your public schools and get the curriculum. You can meet with the teacher or the
Yeah.
principal. I mean, they really are a community institution. And so,
Mhm.
one of the things that, we find interesting is just that people are not trusting their own lived experience as former public school students. And then they're
Mhm.
also not trusting the experience their own families having because these
Mhm.
things are, I mean, when I was on the school board, I would hear things like my favorite was the kitty litter in the bathrooms thing. I don't know if you, but people would come in and be like, "Oh, the kitty litter in the bathrooms," and it's like, I read that article too. I know the rumor got made up. Like, I follow the same things that you do. I've already been emailed this 5 times, but I could go to any of our campuses right now, and I'm not going to find a litter box in a bathroom. But
Exactly. Yeah.
but they're coming in and they're saying it, even though they know at their own school that's like not happening, and so
Exactly.
it's just really interesting that these people have this lived experience of like things like that never happening, but then,
Mhm.
they're hearing it from trusted sources. And I think that's the thing that we're trying to appreciate is that, we're trying to, and your account does this as well, be good stewards of information for other people, try to educate
Yeah.
people and bring them along. And we also have to appreciate though that they're following other people online or through the media who they trust. And so when
Exactly.
trusted people tell them things,
Mhm.
I understand why they're trusting them. But,
Yeah.
that's sort of one of our information things is just having to get over that. So we're asking all of our podcast guests the same question for 2024,
Okay.
and we want predictions. And so what's your prediction of what's going to happen around public education in 2024?
I think there's going to be more pushback to school choice than the sensationalized stories give people credit for. Like I think once people really take a look at vouchers or whatever whatever rigged scheme people come up with. I think once people actually dive into those things, they realize that no, like this isn't fair. This is benefiting one certain group of people who don't really need that benefit in the first place. We would rather invest in schools, in teachers, in our communities, Yeah, I think that for all the sensationalism of Moms for Liberty and, how bad it's gone in Arizona, like, all these things get so much attention, but I really think people are sick of it and they're going to express that at the ballot box.
Well, I hope so. And I tend to agree with you.
Yeah. I think the tides are turning. Like, I
Thanks.
think I think especially the book bans, people have gotten to the point where we're like, the dictionary. Like, do we really have to go down this road? And so yeah, I think that in some ways the experiment has gone a step too far, and people are definitely willing to push back now. So
Absolutely. Well, Brittney, I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing in Oregon and to educate people around the issues that impact their families.
thank
And
you, and thank you for all of your guys' work too. It's been so fun to collaborate and watch each other
Yes.
use Instagram as a way to get this information out there. So
great. Well, to our listeners and our viewers, thanks for joining us once again. The podcast will be available on your favorite streaming platform and then also on YouTube.